have you now.
They want to mess with my droid. They're going to pay for it.
This is the way.
You may fire when ready.
Blow that piece of junk out of the sky!
The way you're fighting, you wouldn't have lasted long.
Hello there.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
We have now sat with Star Wars Outlaws for 2 weeks, testing the game, playing the game, and writing down our honest thoughts and opinions to share with you. For those of you who don't know about the program, my name is Carter, and this is Star Wars Station, your home for Star Wars news, breakdowns, reviews, and commentary. And this month, we're bringing you a review that's been on everybody's Star Wars radar, the hotly anticipated open-world game, Star Wars Outlaws. This game is a big diversion from what we've been used to with the Jedi-heavy video games that we've gotten. I mean, pretty much since Star Wars Inception. I mean, the most popular Star Wars games we've seen, like KOTOR, The Force Unleashed, recently with Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor. They're always Jedi-centric. This one, though, Underworld-centric. It lets us explore the seedier side of the galaxy far, far away. And we've got our thoughts on that to spell out coming up. And we also, on this show, have some very sad, a very thoughtful HoloNet news segment for you today because we want to celebrate the life and legacy of one of Star Wars' most titanic voices, James Earl Jones. We were really saddened to hear about that news this week of his passing, and we want to give him the respect that he deserves with his monumental contribution to all of our lives, listeners, to mine and Colin's lives, to everyone who is a Star Wars fan. Obviously, James Earl Jones has touched you. And so, as I said, that's going to be coming up in the HoloNet news. I just wanted to talk about that at the start of the show because it's just such big news that hit us just a couple days ago. But before we get to that news, we have the meat of the podcast to talk about. We're going to dive into Star Wars Outlaws. We're going to give you our raw thoughts. We're going to talk about the gameplay, the mechanics. We're going to talk about the story, everything involved. And when I say we, it's not just me here to dissect Star Wars Outlaws, but none other than the Ashiga enforcer himself, Colin Archer.
Hey, Carter, man, episode 101. Here's to the next 99 past this one.
Yeah.
But yeah, Star Wars Outlaws, it's quite a deal, isn't it? There's a lot to it. There's, it's fun in some ways, not so much fun in other aspects. And we're going to get through, I think we're going to dissect this thing pretty well.
Yeah, no, we have a lot to talk about. There's a lot. This game's a big game. It was announced just a little over a year ago, and now it's finally here. It had been in development for a little while. And so they had a specific goal in mind with this game. Having played it, you can really tell this was trying to be Star Wars Red Dead, Star Wars GTA, and it doesn't hit that exactly, but it's a good game. We have a lot of good and a lot of bad to talk about, and this is going to kind of be just like a thought dump from the both of us because it's hard to structure a long-form game review where we're trying to talk about every aspect. So it's just the conversation's going to flow naturally into different aspects to talk about this game. But the first part that I think we should talk about is just the gameplay itself, the game part of the game itself.
This one was hard for me to endure. There was the first thing is I kind of take issue with the open world descriptor. Or, I mean, like you just said, Red Dead, GTA. I have over 2,000 hours in GTA. So I think I know what I'm talking about when it comes to that. And this game falls so short of that, it's uncanny. And the main aspect of it is all the tutorials are incredibly long. And when you fail the tutorials, it resets you so far back. It was a keyboard smashing moment for me.
Yeah, it was way platformer-y, that's not a word, but it was much more like a platformer than I ever expected this game to be.
Yeah.
Like, it felt like Jedi Survivor 2.5.
Yes.
Like, it was...
Without the Jedi powers.
Yeah, exactly. You're hopping around, zip-lining around everywhere.
Then, I'll take responsibility for this one more, but there's one of the starter missions. I spent a good hour trying to figure out how to get to the other side, to get to the objective. And finally, I broke down and looked up a tutorial online. And, you got to climb up this wall here. And it was just totally blanked out. It had shown me that previously. But I'm like, it wasn't apparent to me that I had to do this.
Well, are you talking specifically about the Gorak mission?
Yes.
Yes. That mission specifically, the devs, after launch day, made some comments about how that mission had been poorly received, like it was a difficult mission that was front-loaded at the beginning of the game.
It's a gateway mission that you can't do anything. Like, there's no other missions that are open past that. And, you know, in GTA, if you want to start the game, punch in a cheat code, and start stealing vehicles and flying jets and do all this stuff, you can do that. In this game, you're hours and hours behind frustrating gateway missions.
Yeah, the missions, they have a lot. Like, basically all of... There's a tutorial mission on Canto Bight. Totally normal. That one is necessary because it's just teaching you basic game mechanics. But then you get to Toshara, which is essentially Tutorial Planet. Because you have to go through 5 or 6 missions back to back to really get able to do anything else.
And it seemed... the other part was, and I didn't mind this, it's not the game for me in the sense of, I want you to use stealth mechanics all the way through this. You know, don't get caught. It's set up in the top right corner the whole time. And if you got caught, the mission reset. Except for a mission right after this, you go to an Imperial starbase and don't get caught. And you're swinging around, you're doing all this stuff, and you free this head in a jar, and you have to blast all these stormtroopers. It's something like an absurd amount of these guys, including an officer. It's like 8 of these things. And they're going over to the console, and you got to shoot them, and your blaster's overheating the whole time. It's like, man, I thought you wanted to be quiet during this whole thing.
Right,
Why couldn't I pick up this head? Oh, I got to keep my stuff. Man, come on.
Yeah, Bosnak.
Bro.
I enjoyed Bosnak. I thought it was funny.
He's a good character. It was funny, but the juxtaposition, you got to be sneaky. You got to be sneaky. Oh, we're going to set you 20 minutes back if you're not sneaky. Oh, no. Start blasting stuff.
Well, see, that's what I think.
Sneaky.
That's what I think some of this was, especially on Toshara, because that never goes away. The missions, a lot of them, like 80% of a mission, is like play your own way. It's like you can go through and have a gunfight the whole time, or you can be stealthy the whole time. And then there's the last 20% that forces you to do one or the other. And so it's not really like a versatile play style. You can't choose to just be this run and gun, I'm going to kill everybody, because there's certain missions where if you make any sound, you know, you're caught and you have to start over. And then there's ones where you can say, there were times where I was like, all right, I'm going to stealth out of this building. I got it. And just immediately they recognize you and start shooting at you. The game forces you to be recognized.
Right. And so that's my beef with it is, I think the choice should exist like that in totality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine with being sneaky. It's fun because the next character, your little pet thing, he's awesome.
Yes, yeah.
Getting him to distract stuff, it makes it into a very enjoyable mechanic. Distract this guy, go up and bonk him on the head. And it feels like a nitpick. I'm not going to say this is a criticism because it would be too Hitman style, but like, I'll conk this guy out, and this other guy I patrol just doesn't even notice.
Right.
In Hitman, you got to hide the bodies, and this one you don't. That's fine.
I like all those mechanics, but as you said, in the Gorak mission specifically, which was brutal, the devs talked about how they need to change that. They need to patch that to make it easier, because it's probably the hardest mission in the game. And it is the first one. Yeah. I never encountered a mission that was as difficult as the Gorak mission. Now, I encountered missions that maybe I wasn't finding where I needed to go, or I kept dying or whatever, but the Gorak mission specifically was just plain hard. Because there's not like a way to do a double takedown, which really, and there may be eventually, but there wasn't one that was readily unlockable. And so there's pairs of guards everywhere.
Yeah,
and you can't
it's
take them
impossible
both
to do
down.
anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I finally got to the point where it didn't feel like I was supposed to be able to do it. I'd send Nyx to attack one, sprint after Nyx, clock the other one with my fists before the game could react to the fact that I had gotten close enough to this guy. And while the other one's struggling with Nyx clawing his eyes out, then I karate chop him down too. Yeah. And it was just like, that was my strategy every time I saw 2 guards. The entire game was send Nyx, bum rush immediately afterwards.
Yeah, and you have this tiny window to execute that. And it's just oppressive if you can't do it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, because in the case where you get caught, you got to restart. Getting caught is being looked at. Like there's nothing else. It is immediate that they say you're caught.
Yeah.
Because in the Imperial facilities, was fine with me. This was one of the better parts of the stealth mechanic. And I read some of the devs talking about this, and I really appreciate what they had said they tried to do here. Was you've got the Imperial facilities, sectioned out in rooms. There are walls in between, or maybe it's just an elevated platform over a room. Everyone's seen what an Imperial facility looks like. Well, if you alert some guy on the bridge, and he starts making a ruckus, well, all the guys near him are going to hear him. But not everybody in the whole facility is. They have to start the alarm to get the whole facility alerted. And so I appreciated the fact that I could accidentally alert 4 people, and then I've got to do quick, fast takedowns. I did not appreciate the fact that I get looked at by a pike, and now game over.
Yeah, 20 minutes setback.
Yeah, exactly, because the setbacks were huge. Where the save file was to where you got in that mission was insane. You could have gotten to this happened to me once, and I was maybe the maddest I'd gotten in the whole game. And this, in hindsight, is a little bit my fault, but this shouldn't be happening. I do the whole mission. I make it all the way through. I'm like attempt 5, attempt 6. I'm like boarding a speeder to get away. And as I board the speeder, I pull my blaster out and I stun blast this guy who had never noticed me. He falls down, and then 2 seconds later, red exclamation point. The stormtrooper walking saw his body, freaked out, you're caught, restart.
Oh,
and I was on the escape. I was moving away from the game. So again, slightly my fault for just randomly taking some pop shot like that. The game should not have processed a mistake, and if it did, it shouldn't send me back to the beginning of the mission.
Yeah.
That was very frustrating.
Since you mentioned like slips of controls and stuff like that, I constantly had issues. And this is where the Jedi Survivor mechanic totally slapped me in the face. I didn't think we'd seen any of that in previews. What I'm talking about is like, I want to swing across a chasm. I want to clamber to the wall and go to the side, and I'm going to jump over to the ledge, and I'm going to hop up to another ledge. And I'm like, well, this is a worse version of that. It was overt when the Jedi Survivor wanted you to do this. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I have to do this again? I didn't think I was going to do this. So, but what I ran into multiple times, and the game wasn't punishing in this fact, I go to swing across a chasm, and the character... and it could be my fault, I'm sure, was I didn't hit the keyboard or I moved the mouse just enough, or I'd swing into the wall and fall down the chasm. Reload, swing off the cliff. Okay, this is not fun.
Funny. I'm sorry that happened to you.
Yeah.
That sounds funny.
Well, I know it's my fault because the same thing happened in Jedi Survivor so many times.
Yeah. Just the swing mechanic.
But it's just like, I don't want to do that anymore.
Well, I don't really like platform games. I enjoy Jedi Survivor a lot because of the story and the combat. The platforming aspects are my least favorite part of that game. The puzzle-solving aspects are my least favorite part of that game. The platforming aspects of this game were my least favorite part of this game. And so... And
weren't a lot of people complaining about the puzzle-solving stuff? Like, I know there's an option to disable the lock-picking thing.
Oh, I liked that. I liked all the puzzle solving. I thought it was clever. The sound reaction to that
was neat.
Was clever, and then the slicing, the symbols, I got good at that. I got good at slicing.
The symbols was fun. But I can understand people being frustrated. The symbols was easy to pick up though. That one was fun.
Yeah. So while we're talking gameplay and technical issues, I downloaded the game 3 days early. Was not able to play it. My wife got exceptionally sick, and so I had to take care of her. And so I just played it on the opening day like normal. And I had one of the worst bugs I've ever had in a game I've played. And I'm not much of a gamer, so that's not saying a whole lot. But I got about 50 minutes in. I'm looking at Sleero's mansion in the tutorial, and my character just freezes, is jumping all over the map. And I'm streaming. I'm like, okay, got to shut this down, load back in. 15-minute save file away. So I've got to retraverse all this area to get back to the mansion, and it happens again. And so I shut down my PlayStation, or I shut down my Xbox, boot it up. It happens again. And so I just had to get off. I had to stop streaming. I gave it like a few hours, came back, happens again, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't play this game. Like something's wrong with this. I'm going to have to wait for a patch. And then it finally just like brute forced fixes itself. Eventually, the character just stops stuttering, resumes the dialogue, and continues on. And that's just after it's sitting on the screen like that for 10 minutes. I didn't run into it again, but there were like 5 people watching our stream. We talked about it in the chat. It was pretty staggering that this difficulty.
Yeah,
came
I
up.
mean, you have the patience of Job there, right? I mean, seriously, second time that I had done that, I'd put down the game for the day. If I'd have played the game again, I would never touch it again.
Yeah.
So good on you for that.
Well, it was for the listeners. It was for the listeners.
Well, since you brought up that 3-day early access, and I understand you had some personal circumstances, but even then, the base price of this game was $80.
It's $70.
$70?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Base price was $70.
Well, I feel like I came out with a win for that because you can subscribe to the Ubisoft monthly Game Pass and get to play it.
Oh, this was on Game Pass.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm happy for that.
Yeah. How much is that 15 month?
17 or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's good. No, yeah, it was 70 though. It was still very expensive, but that's also, I understand that there's some criticism around the game's price point. That's just what AAA games cost now, which is unfortunate. I hate that video games are $70. Video games have outpaced the price of a barrel of oil on some days.
It's crazy.
But that just,
and it's crazy that I remember the first Nintendo games were $60, and that was back in the 80s.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's staggering.
Yeah, Zelda.
That's
Mario Brothers.
That's
2.
$100 now.
Yeah.
Or more. Wow.
Way more.
Yeah. That's really crazy, actually.
Yep. They're trying to make money on the actual games back then. On the actual
But
game.
the console itself was very expensive also, right?
It was $100 something back then.
Okay. That's not as bad as that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's half the money today of a PlayStation or Xbox.
Oh.
Inflation wise, right?
Oh, no.
$100 in the 80s would be like $250 today, maybe.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to continue talking about the game, and one of the other problems, and there are highlights. We've definitely just hammered on problems. Right now.
I'm sure we're going to have the same thing when a highlight, and I can't wait to talk about that.
Yeah. No, there's good highlights, but it's just we chose to talk about gameplay first, and I think that's maybe the low point for both of us.
Yeah.
Is the gameplay. We're also not people who like these kind of games. Like I'm outspoken a person who does not like Red Dead Redemption. I don't like Skyrim. I don't like any kind of game where I'm got to move around and do fetch quests the whole time.
Yeah.
But missions felt repetitive, and that happened for 2 reasons. One is because every mission is a fetch quest, like every single one. And the other problem is that the gameplay is just the same over and over. Platform a little bit, do some stealth, knock some guys out. Now the alarm's on, shoot some people up into your mission. And that's just everywhere against every faction every time. And so the missions just continued to feel really repetitive, along with the fact that the missions themselves are like crime stories from the real world, which is not a big deal. I'm not asking them to invent new crime. That doesn't even make any sense. But that it's a lot of small ball crime from the real world. That this feels like specifically missions you would get in GTA.
Yeah.
And
When
that
there
was
one with
frustrating.
freeing some dogs or something you mentioned, and freeing some animals.
Oh yeah, well that's I was gonna give
You
a
wanna
little
save
bit of
that?
that
Okay, I'm jumping the gun. All right.
in my story problems.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll
We'll
talk
wait for
about
that.
that in a little while. But in general, the missions just felt very repetitive.
Yeah, I
and the
agree with you on
mechanics.
that. And they seem so inconsequential. I remember one of the first missions, like, oh, go steal a blaster part for your gun. Okay, cool. I'm gonna go steal a part, and I have to run through this literal gauntlet of enemies to steal a blaster part.
Right.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah. Yes. And that was like every 5th mission was steal a blaster part.
Yeah.
Every 5th mission was steal a speeder upgrade. Like it was just over and over and over. And so that got really frustrating on how repetitive those were. Other than that, I was okay with like the in-game travel. That's usually my big complaint about these games is when I'm playing Red Dead Redemption, I'm riding a freaking horse for 20 minutes and I'm not doing anything else.
I didn't play Red Dead probably because of that.
Yeah, well,
but the
frustrating.
space mechanics were a lot of fun.
Yes.
You go to space for the first time and some ties and some bandits come after you. And it had some help mechanics in there that let you get on target a little easier. and I think that ship was more maneuverable than the chassis would allow for, literally. But that's fine. I mean, aerial combat in a 3D space is in real factor is exceedingly hard to be successful at. There's a lot of people who play flight sims with real fighter jet analogs that you can just scroll through and watch like the minute videos on YouTube or something like that. And the amount of knowledge and skill that those people have to be successful is insane. Like the bell curve only exists on the far right side.
Sure.
And this thing, they did an extremely good job with the flight mechanics to where anybody could be effective at flying what was that ship called?
The Trailblazer.
The Trailblazer.
Yeah, I would say I totally agree with you. I think that all of the ship mechanics felt really good. Ship combat was a lot of fun. Like you said, there was the aim assist, which was just necessary. It wouldn't have been fun without the aim assist.
Well, a TIE fighter or an A-Wing would be impossible to hit.
Yeah, exactly. Profile is just too small. Yeah. The way the ships moved was really fun, and the quickness and the way you could get around space was all really good. I have a lot of good things to say about space, and I have a lot of good things to say about space here in just a minute when we're kind of talking about mission design and level design.
Yeah.
The way that you interacted with the ship and with a lot of the other customization in the game was a lot more than I expected, and that was really welcome. I didn't think that this was going to be very customizable at all, actually, and everything ended up being exceptionally customizable.
Yeah, and then like if you got the add-on DLCs, like the wardrobe, changing all that was really cool. I wish you could change your hair up a little bit.
Sure.
But
there's no character customization whatsoever.
Yeah, and I'm not really going to criticize that. That's fine. I think there should and I didn't play as much of the game, but controlling ND5 would be a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And hairstyles would be a lot of fun. You know, I think on a basic level, something like that. Because I like to wear hats. And
well, yeah, it's
comb my
interesting
hair.
because it's that exists in Jedi Survivor, and that's a fixed character. But they don't mind.
Yeah.
Cal has a mullet and a mustache.
Yeah, and I understand we don't really want a mustache on her. People can do that. I think that'd look a little strange, but a different hairstyle, different color hair, that's a very common and acceptable thing to do.
Sure,
in anybody.
sure.
that I think was a slight lacking thing.
But again, I didn't expect any customization, pretty much at all, and they had a bunch of it.
Yeah,
your
speeder,
your ship was completely customizable. You could get multiple guns, extra missiles, extra blasters. You could do shield upgrades, engine upgrades, compartment upgrades. I mean, that ship was yours, and I didn't expect that to be the case. The speeder, the same way. You could make it as fast, as maneuverable, as whatever you wanted, and the blaster also the same way. The way it looked, the way it shot, the way the abilities worked, and your outfit also gave you all kinds of customizable abilities. I was very impressed with the customization.
Yeah, me too. It was that part was done really well. And then I guess another thing, I wish they had more guns. Every now and then you got to pick up a blaster rifle from a stormtrooper or something like that. And I'm not asking for like a force or electro pike or anything like that. And really, as far as I'm concerned, they can just skin it different. But instead of her blaster, why not Han Solo's DL-44?
Well, that's his skin. That is a skin for it.
Oh, well, shut my mouth. Sure. So, yeah. I don't know.
The way that you interacted with picking up blasters to me was pretty interesting because they were all like single use. Like you could never carry around with you an E11. But you could shoot it for a little while you're in the Imperial base, and then you got to drop.
And I never got to use one because I would always kill all the enemies, pick up a blaster, and I'd go to a different zone and the blaster would be gone.
Yeah, well, anytime you did anything that wasn't pulling the trigger on that blaster, you dropped it. Like, I've got this E11 in my hand. There's enemies coming. I'm going to throw a grenade, and then I'm going to start shooting. Throw a grenade, and now I'm back to using my pistol. The blaster's just sitting on the ground.
Yeah, strange.
And that was odd. Yeah, that didn't seem like it needed to be the case. But they were just, like, interactable with objects, which was just... I mean... It was like they were trying to give us multiple blasters, but only in this limited setting, because they were all very OP. Every blaster you picked up demolished anything you pointed it at. Yeah. There was a grenade launcher that was like just game over.
Just the grenades themselves, they were so fun.
Yeah, yes. And then there was the sniper. They had a light machine gun.
That was the one I'm sorry I didn't get to use. I picked up the sniper, and then I went down the hallway and turned a corner, and I guess I'd interacted with something and it disappeared.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was so the blasters were all really good, and I only understand that they didn't give them to us. One, because your blaster, it kills things. Obviously, it's also a tool though. Like you had the ion and the big blast and the regular shot, all to solve the different puzzles. And so it was a tool, so you needed to have that. And then the other is just those blasters, insanely powerful. I mean, a stormtrooper is like 7 shots with your little pistol, and he is like 1 with the E11. And so it was just night and day difference.
Yeah, it was fun.
It was fun. It was fun. I'll say on the upgrades side, one of the things that I did not like was that to test out the ship upgrades, you had to go to space. And to get the ship upgrades, you had to be on the ground. And so I would put a gun on my ship, forget about it, go to space, and then have this wacky gun that was like charging for 3 seconds to shoot this like Death Star blast at a moving TIE fighter. Like, I don't want this. It got so bad though that the last mission is obviously like story locked. Like if you say I'm gonna start the last mission, you can't do anything else until you complete the whole thing. And I did that. I did not anticipate there being a space combat portion of the mission, which there was, and I had just installed that Death Star gun. So it happens to me on the last mission, and I'm trying to nail these TIE fighters to end the game, and I'm just like, boom, shooting giant blasts at them. It was very annoying.
Yeah.
And so I should have been able to test the gun out.
Took 5 times as longer as it would have normally. That's hilarious.
Yes. And so it was funny, but the way that you couldn't really test anything out. You make a change, you've got to go somewhere to test it, and then you got to come back and make the change, which I wish they had like a little testing ground or something. The one thing I really thought that they did well, though, this is speaking about space, is building out space.
Weren't those environments so cool?
They were amazing. They built those environments out for the whole game over every planet. All the open world stuff in space, they did really, really well because it was just debris fields and asteroids and nebulas everywhere.
And bandits would show up and you got to stop them. So cool.
And I was being pursued by TIE fighters over Akiva in the asteroid belt. And it felt so Empire Strikes Back. The reason that anyone plays a Star Wars game is because they want Star Wars moments. They want to feel a Star Wars moment. And so I'm being chased by TIEs, piloting through Akiva, and I'm not shooting at the TIEs. I'm just zipping through the asteroids, trying to clear my name at the Imperial Station. And because of how tight you're making turns by the asteroids, you can cause TIE fighters to crash into them, just like Han in Empire Strikes Back. And so I was very happy and very impressed with this mechanic. I thought that it was just super rewarding. It just felt super great.
The whole time I'm wishing I had a seismic charge just to drop on these guys. Yeah, so fun zipping through all the different things. And to me, that was one of the best parts of the game was the flight mechanics that they did so well with.
Yeah, they did a stupendous job with it. I was really impressed. And I think, again, the shining point for the whole game for me was the open world. I think that the space open world was really good. And then you got 4 planets, which is not a lot of planets. And obviously I wish there were more planets. But all 4 planets are very, very fleshed out. Tashara did not capture me like Kobo did in Jedi Survivor. Like, I wasn't like, oh, this planet's so awesome, like I thought Kobo was. But it was still a good planet as far as new planets go. And then the other planets, they were just gems. Going to Tatooine was super rewarding. Walking through Chalmun's Cantina, you go through Jabba's palace, all of it's just so awesome. You get to see the whole thing. The world's so expansive. And they filled Tatooine in with so much detail that I definitely spent the most of my game on Tatooine. Like, I played 3 real-world days of playtime only on Tatooine. And so that was really, really fun. But then you go to Kijimi, and you're able to find like the hidden sabacc tables and behind all these buildings, all of the crevices and things to do. And that was really rewarding. And finally, Akiva, I'm always curious. So Akiva was in the Star Wars Aftermath books, for anybody who doesn't know. It was introduced in those books. It is Snap Wexley's home planet, who is a character in this game. And on Akiva, the description in the book is fine. It's like this rainforest planet, whatever. Well, I didn't really get a good picture when I read that book, but they did an amazing job in the game. I mean, it was basically Planet Brazil. The buildings looked Brazilian. There was the rainforest there. It was just a really neat concept. And I'm always thinking, how are they going to do some new Star Wars planet? And they always do it specifically in these video games, and I was very impressed with that. I thought all of the planet open world was the highlight of the game.
And I want to back you up 100%. That was my favorite part. And you get to live in the Star Wars universe. And, I mean, flying around, the speeder. I read a lot of reviews and saw them that the speeder was awful. When I flew it, it was actually really cool. So I'm glad to have proved some of those naysayers wrong.
Sure.
And it took some skill. You couldn't just get on the thing and start putting directions. You know, I'm a keyboard and mouse, so you can't just sit there and mash controls. And if you take the time to practice with that speeder, you get real effective with it.
I had horrific crashes on that thing. Yeah. Like crashes, I'm going so fast, I run into a boulder, and I'm like, this woman is surely dead. Like immediately.
Well, that's what happened to the stormtroopers, right, on Endor.
Right.
So, but more than that, you're the tutorial planet, the little city in there. You're walking through, and the people are shouting at you, right? And they shout at you on every city, right? And it's so fun to interact with all the random people, all the thought that they've done with that. But it feels like you're walking around and existing, like almost like when you walk into Disney World and you're on Batuu. Right. You know, that's not the same because everybody's in civilian clothes. They look like you. You're in Florida hanging out. It's hot there. You go to Brazil Planet. You go to Tatooine. You're interacting with all these different things. I felt a lot of the same way in Star Wars Galaxies. You know, that game had Tatooine and Kashyyyk and a bunch of different places that you could go to. And it was all quests and stuff. But it was all hyper dated. Like, people would laugh at the graphics compared to today.
Sure.
And so, but even then, this game, like, so outshines that just by all the little stuff on the walls, stuff on the floor, the little animals running around. You know, it seems to me that that's where most of the effort was, making the environment feel totally Star Wars.
Yeah. No, they did a wonderful job with that. I totally agree. You're walking by all those people in the market or on Kijimi or wherever, and you're just hearing all these side conversations that a lot of them are like super meaningless. Like, they're not all Easter eggs, which is a good thing because you wouldn't want every random piece of dialogue. You hear about that Luke Skywalker guy, but it's all makes it feel so lived in.
Yeah,
like you said.
I mean, and even then, there's the very first guy at the start who scams you. Oh yeah, right. For 50 credits, I'll give you a VIP pass. You're like, hey, that's too good to be true, but whatever, it's a game, I'll do it. And then, and I don't know if it carried out throughout the whole rest of the game, but it was the being an outlaw part of it, right? And an outlaw, when I hear outlaw, I think of like this gruff cowboy who, if he sets foot in town, people are scurrying away and all this other stuff.
Right.
And I, you know, there's you walk around and be like, oh, that's K-Vess. And so that was really kind of cool. And the first thing is, one of the first things you do is you rip off this homeless guy.
Yeah.
and so personally, I felt bad for it, right? Because I'm like, I'm not going to do this. But I'm like, I'm an outlaw. I get to do horrible, mean things.
Yeah. Well, and that was something really important to talk about, because Kay continues to make like underworld, outlaw, immoral decisions the whole game, which is a good thing. I was scared that she wasn't going to do that, because we don't want another just Rebel Alliance story, whatever, where it's just a good guy. Because if we're going to have an underworld story, we're going to have a crime story, we want an underworld crime story. You want to be an outlaw, as the name implies. And so the element where the more jobs you take on, the more money your jobs are worth, the more you hear your name, the more people know who you are, was really fun. That made it feel like your decisions were impacting the universe. Just like the reputation system made you feel a lot like your decisions were impacting the universe. Because I streamed most of the game, and it allowed me to let our viewers and listeners vote on like who I was going to align with, basically. And so we came out strong in favor of aligning with the Hutt Cartel and Crimson Dawn. Ashiga Clan, it was kind of just like business transaction, not trying to be good or bad with them. And the Pikes hated me. Had terrible reputation with the Pikes. Basically never made a positive Pike decision. And That was really fun because the way they laid the planets out with the zone systems of this is Hutt territory, this is Pike territory, yada, yada, yada. Well, when you cross into those zones, excellent standing with people. People know who you are. They're nice to you. You're getting discounts. It was all really cool. You accidentally drive your speeder through the terrible zone. There are pikes gunning after you, chasing you with speeders, trying to shoot you down. It made it feel like your decisions and who you were aligning with actually mattered in the universe. And that was a lot of fun. I thought that was a big highlight of it.
Yeah, that mechanic was super fun. Just getting recognized. That happened once to me, and I'm like, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was great. It was so cool because it's realistic. And as far as you want Star Wars to be realistic, I mean, in the 20th century United States, you go to New York City, and there are parts of town that are run by the mafia, run by the Irish mob, run by the Russian mob. Like, there are parts of town that are designated by different criminal organizations in the exact same way that there are parts of Kijimi City or parts of Tatooine or parts of Tashara that are run by the Pikes, run by the Hutts, run by Crimson Dawn. It all made a lot of good, actual criminal sense. One of the places that doesn't make a lot of good criminal sense is most all of the missions you get sent on seem pretty... Now, the bad guys continue to do bad stuff. Jabba's feeding people to Rancors, Goreks, just killing random people. The Ashiga clan lady gets her head chopped off. There's all kinds of criminal activity going on, but all of the missions that you, K-Vess, are sent on are like humanitarian aid missions disguised as criminal activity. Like, you go on one of the very first missions, like you had mentioned earlier, to release some poached animals that a rival gang has been selling. Well, you're hurting the rival gang, so there's your little criminal element. But why are you, criminal who does not care at all about the animals, only cares about the money, not capturing the animals to sell in your own criminal organization? Or if anyone's seen The Godfather, killing the animals. I mean, I'm not advocating for killing these animals.
Yeah, you want to send them a message.
Yeah,
right?
But exactly. That's the point, is that you're a criminal. This is a crime syndicate in the underworld. We have seen the Star Wars underworld. Jabba the Hutt froze Han Solo in carbonite for a year and was never going to let him leave. There's that Celestin gangster on Akiva whose brother is frozen in carbonite as his desk table. And, like, you have these people doing bad things, but your character's not allowed to do
she's a quasi-hero.
Exactly, yes. And it's not... I'm very happy that she doesn't side with the Rebel Alliance and that's not the way the story goes. And she doesn't do, like, Rebel Alliance-y things pretty much ever. Everything is selfishly motivated.
Yeah, in the end, she thwarts the plans of an Imperial goon.
That's true, but exactly. But that is also true, as she thwarts some Imperial guy. But it's all selfish at least. But regardless, there's a lot of just, your character is not allowed to be a criminal in this game where you're supposed to be a criminal.
So this is, if I had to list the disappointments, that's one of the big ones. The very first thing that K-Vess does is you log into the, you tell it new game, it starts up, and she gets out of the bed, and the first thing she does is strap on a pistol. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing I thought is live by the gun, die by the gun. And that's what an outlaw does. The stereotypical mythical outlaw from spaghetti westerns and whatnot is they're strapping on a gun because people are hunting them all the time.
Right.
So I was really hoping that when it came to all this outlaw stuff, that we're going to get some philosophical... I guess we do get a little bit about that in some of the flashbacks to when she's a kid, but it seemed real shallow to me.
It is. It is a little shallow, and it may not be shallow. We both kind of speed ran this game to do this review because there's a lot of emotional weight at the end of the story that felt a little lost on me, but I'm pretty positive is only lost on me because I only did the main quests. Like, I did not do any of the syndicate quests that you're definitely supposed to do before you complete the game. And so there's some emotional weight to some decisions, and there's some weight to, like, the message of the game that we'll get to when we talk about the story that is good, is very Star Wars, and does matter. But as far as what it means to be an outlaw or what it means to be a criminal, that's basically non-existent.
Well, how existing in that lifestyle, because even if you give a cursory thought to how those Old West mythical characters would have lived, it's a horrifying existence. And part of Kay Vess does. I mean, you start out and she lives above a bar, and her patron guy, the Zabrakian guy, Bram, gets shot on her behalf, and she has to flee. That's terrifying.
Yeah.
You know, and fortunately, this game, you don't have to eat or use the bathroom. But if she did, I mean, you do a couple times, and that's a whole other story.
I'd say they spend...
But it would be awful. Existence as an outlaw is awful.
The story on Tatooine spends the most time doing this, showing this, and doing the best job of it. When you're with the Celestin, who's supposed to be the heavy, Haas is his name, and Kay is like, why can't we find this guy? And ND5's like, well, he's on the run because the Hutts want to kill him. And she's like, well, why do the Hutts want to kill him? And just, he betrayed them or whatever. And then you find this guy, and he's like an old man. And he's been in this life for a while. And he just keeps talking about the next big score, yada, yada, and how he has to get square with the Hutts, this and that. And all of Kay's dialogue throughout that entire mission, until the guy gets eaten by a Rancor, is... well, I don't want to turn out like this guy. I don't want to turn like on the run all the time, living in the middle of the desert on Tatooine. Because ND5 she's like, why did he choose to? She asked ND5, why did he choose to, run away to Tatooine? And he's like, well, he didn't have any money to go anywhere else, so he's just hiding out in the desert. She's like, and Kay's like terrified of that. So the whole point of you trying to get all this money at the end of the game to be free is so you don't have to end up like this Haas guy.
Well, that's a whole and that's the whole thing with being an outlaw is it's that zero-sum game almost. You're never going to get enough.
Right, exactly. So there was some elements of that, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. Some of the missions that you go on, especially on Tatooine actually, but a lot of the missions that you go on, we've talked about the repetitiveness. I'm not going to talk any more about that. It's just some of them are repetitive, like you can only find too many random stashes behind a waterfall somewhere before it feels like a cliche crime novella. But there's some missions that are really, really cool, and that I think some people will really gravitate towards. Like I think you'll find, because there is not it's not called customization, but there's a little bit of kind of narrowing down and honing in the exact character that you want to be and what kind of person you want to be, what kind of outlaw you want to be, and those missions that you can complete push you in those directions by what clothes you're going to unlock and things like that. So I got like super invested in the Sabacc High Roller side missions, where you'd go to each planet, you'd have to find a bunch of clues about where these hidden underground Sabacc games are happening, and then you'd go and play against the different high rollers. And so like there was a lot of stuff like this in all different kinds of trees and aspects, and so I think that's something that a lot of people are going to get out of it, is that you're going to find that niche of, well, I really like running guns, to and from planets, and, trying to thwart the Empire and stuff like that, and so that's what I'm going to do. And so I think there's a lot of people that are going to be able to find those missions like that. That was a highlight for me, was the high roller Sabacc mission specifically. I was like, this is super fun. This is a lot of fun.
Yep. That does sound like a ton of fun.
Yep.
Getting to do... there's been so many games over the years where they have the evil factions and stuff. One of them was a bulletin board. They called them doors back, but it was all text-based. And they had an evil faction in that. And you stole from space stations and sold back the goods and stuff. And your alignment went lower. It was neat. But getting like I figure in my mind what it's like is doing different roles, like smuggler or
that's exactly
playboy
what it's like.
or doing this or doing that. Heist guy, you call Andor in the TV show, they do that big heist on the planet. So that'd be neat.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it's like. And you're able to kind of focus down into those kinds of missions. It was good. That was a big highlight of that for me, because that's what I wanted to do when I first set out to play the game. We talk about how much I love Lando on this podcast, how much you love Lando on this podcast. I want to be Lando. I was like, I want to be rich. I was like, my character's goal is to be super wealthy.
Yeah, if you got the DLC, you can dress like Lando too.
Yeah, exactly.
It was awesome.
Exactly. So we've talked gameplay. We've kind of talked broad strokes, but let's talk about the story. As I've said a bunch of times, I haven't completed all the side quests or the syndicate quests, but I've completed the main story of the game. And so the beginning of the game is very slow going. We talked about this. I think I spent 9 hours before I met ND5, which was... as much as he was in the trailer and the advertisements, that was way too long for me to have been playing, to have not met this droid yet. And because he's a main part of the story.
Yeah,
when
yeah,
we're
he
about
is.
to figure out how this guy is he's not a side character. He is a main character.
Yep.
And so that was a big chunk of this game. It's like a 30-hour game. So that's a third of the game he's not even in. Because a third of the game is Tutorial Planet. You're on Toshara for a very long time. With the most difficult missions all front-loaded at the beginning. And it's more difficult than the final mission by like a huge margin. And so that was all very frustrating. I'm not amazing at video games, but it seemed like I should not have to wait 9 hours for the open world game to not force me to be on one planet.
Yeah.
And so that was very frustrating. But the gist of the main plot is that you have to collect specialists for your heist of the main vault of Zarek Besh, which is a crime syndicate that you wronged in the tutorial because you trusted the Rebel Alliance to break into this for money. They didn't tell you they were rebels, and then they left you for dead. And so that was all interesting. You escape Zarek Besh at the end of that tutorial, and then you have a giant bounty on your head, and you're just a death mark, exactly. You're just little old K Vess. You grew up on Canto Bite. You don't know any better. You don't know where you are. You don't know how to do this crime thing, and so you're pretty worried. And so you stole Slero, the leader of Zarek Besh's ship, the Trailblazer, and the game spends so much time making you think that this ship is important. There's countless lines of dialogue about this ship. The Trailblazer, the EML 500. This ship is so unique. This ship is so special. Oh, you think she stole one of the rarest ships in the galaxy? Blah, 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 blah about the ship. And there is just right up front, spoiler alert, because I thought it the whole time playing the game. The ship means nothing to the plot of the game whatsoever. It doesn't come up. The way they're hammering it, I'm talking on stream and I'm saying, oh, this ship right here, it's the key to the game. The ship is the prize. The ship is the treasure.
Yeah.
And it's not. It just talked about nonstop.
Meaningless plot points.
Yeah. It was really that was one of the most frustrating elements of the story for me.
And so the way it integrates is Slero, his family had a Corellian shipyard that manufactured the ship.
Yeah, well, so
he's got some reverence toward that is...
Yes, he personally cares about it, but it's mentioned by like half a dozen characters as, whoa, the EML 500?
Yeah, you land on a ship. I can't believe you have one of those. And even in the tutorial missions, you meet the character who helps you out, and he's like all gung-ho to fix this thing up. And he was doing that. I'm like, this doesn't seem like it's going to pass the smell test to me.
Right. Yeah, and he betrays you right off the bat. Waka the Rhodian, and you're like, this guy is gonna betray. From the second you meet him, like, this guy is gonna betray me. You know why? Because he's not in the promotional material.
Yeah.
And so he's just part of Tutorial Planet, which all turns out to be true. And so we learned through a cutscene from Slero, the villain, about his motivation to create this amazing criminal syndicate that rivals the Hutt cartel in such a short amount of time. And his motivation, as you mentioned, his family owned a Corellian ship manufacturer. Well, it gets shut down by the Empire, and that's his entire motivation. From what he tells you, he turned to a life of crime because exactly he had an unsuccessful car dealership. So now he is the head of one of the biggest and best criminal enterprises.
And we should
in the galaxy.
We're underselling it. He was a car manufacturer who didn't make it.
Sure, yeah, he's GM. He's not Scott's Automotive.
Well, he was more DeLorean, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
GM's still in business.
I thought GM made DeLorean.
Well, it was a collaboration project.
Oh, okay.
It was DeLorean's Criminal Pursuits that made it not. maybe that's what this is based off of.
Yeah, maybe so. So anyway, you're out in the big bad galaxy and are approached by a guy named Jalen who wants to break into the Zarek Besh safe, and he wants your help because you're the only person who's ever done it.
And you're going to steal Beskar ingots, which we all know how cool those are.
Yes, yeah, which is, I guess, so when I heard that, he says he's like 100 billion credits or something outrageous of Beskar. Yeah, of Beskar ingots. And I was like, there's no way they have that much Beskar. I was like, that's going to really mess with the plot line of The Mandalorian for there to be that much Beskar in this vault. Well, it turns out there's none. So,
well, and even then, there's this old crime tropes like Die Hard 3 or something. It's like, oh, we're gonna steal all the gold from Fort Knox, the old James Bond gold member. And it's like, oh yeah, go ahead and try that. It would take a crew of 200 men, weeks to haul all the gold off from Fort Knox or something like that. And I would assume the same thing for this. Yeah, Kay Vess and her 5 little Goombas.
We saw in Andor the hovercrafts working that.
Oh, okay.
We've seen this already.
Okay.
It would work fine. With little to no convincing whatsoever, Jalen gets you on his side. Random guy who broke into your ship.
Well, he's kind of strong-armed you, right?
A little bit, kind of. He's not. He never threatens her life. He basically just convinces her there's this big score. You're going to be able to live free, live however you want. Just do it. He never threatens her, not once. He then, after she accepts, says, all right, in D5, this commando droid is going to watch over you and make sure you don't double-cross me. The threat comes after she accepts, and so she does not get strong-armed. She says yes pretty much
I don't know.
the
I'd
gate.
be pretty freaked out if I walked into my house and there's some dude there and a big, scary-looking droid. Hey, we got a mission for you. I'd be like, sounds good, bro.
Okay, I guess that's a little fair. So, in order to collect this crew, you got to go to Tatooine, Kijimi, and Akiva, and get them like Pokemon. And you're not always going to get who you thought you got, and that's like the big overarching. Like you get 2 of the 3, but one of them doesn't pan out. Anyways,
Hey, this happened in The Last Jedi. You go to find the red palm bloom and end up with the other code breaker who's in jail with you.
It is, yeah, the specialist. So over the course of these travels, you're developing relationships with these characters who are joining your team. You're busting them out of jail. You're liberating them from the Empire. All real big stuff.
You're running from the bounty hunter who's after you.
Exactly. You're bargaining with Hutts for their lives. It's all a lot of fun. It's all very Star Wars. All the main story missions are pretty good, and you're developing a connection with these characters. I have no doubt of that. I rushed the game to finish it for the review, so I didn't feel like I was going to have a lot of emotional weight behind these characters. I'm pretty confident you develop that over the Syndicate quests, and you're just taking all kinds of little jobs, because I didn't develop much of a rapport with ND5 either, but you definitely need one by the end of the game.
Right.
And they give a lot of great credence to all these little characters. Like, they're fun. It's like a bomb-making Chadrafan, and just having a Chadrafan character was neat. Like, Indy 5 doesn't even call the Clone Wars the Clone Wars. He calls it the Separatist War. Like, there's just like stuff like that you're like, yeah, that's very Star
the
Wars.
Slash stuff. That's
yeah,
so fun.
it was all good. It was all very good that they did that.
Lots of Rhodians in this. Rhodian characters. Waka. I know who's the one that ends up on your team.
Gadeek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Lots of Rhodian. It's a little frustrating to me that we have, and this is, I don't know. I don't like the RPG-ification of Star Wars aliens. I really like Star Wars.
Alien does this.
Exactly.
Does that. Like you got the little guys with the artificers or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, Anzellans are small, so it makes sense they're going to be a little bit of droid smiths. But I don't like that the Star Wars races almost always get sorted into categories, so much so that the Rhodians and the Chadrafan are in the underworld, and we have them on our team.
The Ugnaughts are the builders.
Exactly. Well, the only Twi'lek character is a rebel. Like, it's just like there's a lot of stereotyping going on with Star Wars species in this game, and that just is always that happens in a lot of Star Wars media, and it frustrates me every time.
Yeah. In Mandalorian, we should mention that the Twi'lek character in there was an outlaw.
Yeah,
Bad guy. He's in jail.
Right. Well, that's good. So all of this mission comes to a head when your mother, who taught you how to be a criminal and abandoned you when you were 12, is the other slicer on this job. She reveals herself. What's up, kiddo? Blah, blah, blah. And you're mad. Shut up, Mom. Anyways, you very quickly get over it. Immediately get over it.
That seems strange. If my mom abandoned me, I wouldn't want anything to do with it.
Well, they didn't want to have to pay Ubisoft devs and writers to develop another 10 seconds of story, so we didn't get any justification. So she's begrudging. She's like, whatever, I'll do it. And they keep it. We need a second slicer. She's the best in the world. Just this. It's like all the heist drama stuff you can cram in.
Yeah, all the tropes. Yeah.
So you and her break into an Imperial facility. It's this giant T-shaped building, or space station floating. It's really cool. It looks awesome. Where, spoiler alert, you're crawling through some vents and you see Darth Vader scolding Slero, who is secretly an Imperial Security Bureau director, and he created Zarek Besh as a criminal organization front so that the Empire can secretly catch the Rebel Alliance working with criminal networks. It is an insane plan, and Darth Vader thinks it's a stupid plan.
It's hyper expensive.
And it's very expensive. It's like another Death Star in costs. And so Darth Vader comes into this office, and it is really cool. It's a good Vader scene because he uses the Force, crushes these glass windows, and then holds all the shards up just inches away from the guy's face, threatening to kill him with a storm of glass, which is super cool. Something we haven't seen
cool
Vader
scene.
do.
Yeah.
But Vader's addition in this game is so superfluous. They have a different voice actor than James Earl Jones, and he doesn't sound anything like Vader. In this time period, Vader just exists as shock value.
Yeah. It's just a bone thrown to fans.
Yeah, and I understand that a bunch of general fans play Star Wars games. They want things like Darth Vader. How are we going to incorporate Darth Vader into this game? Oh, it's got to be in a cutscene like this. But you could have found something else to incorporate. Jabba the Hutt's already in this game. Like, there's things that people are going to recognize. It doesn't have to be Vader.
In the Jedi Survivor games, when you encounter him, you fear for your character's life. Like, the game's over.
Right.
And this game is just like, cool.
Right. Well, and so you see him included, and it's just there's a lot more that could be done, and it waters down the character a little bit that he's just everywhere all at once, and everybody's seeing him getting a glimpse of Vader. Yeah. And that's the other thing. Kate, now this is fine because there's just no other way for them to write this, I don't think. She spends just a little bit of time about how she just saw the Force for the first time, and she doesn't know what the Force is. She's just a random person in the galaxy. So she's like on her comm, I don't know what just happened, that was a fine explanation. If she has to see Darth Vader use the Force, most reasonable thing to say is, I have no idea what just happened.
Yeah. A space wizard doing space wizard things.
Yeah, exactly. But not even some guy in black walked into a room and made it explode and then left. And so she leaves the facility with the information intact, her mind blown, and ready to perform the first heist. Or the last heist. And so you take your team into the vault, and you're successful in the heist. Not really that many hiccups. Slero comes in, tries to catch you, and then Vale, the bounty hunter who's been chasing you, betrays you. You developed some rapport previous in the game, so that it makes fine sense. You escape, and as you get on the ship, then you're betrayed by Jalen. Who could have seen that coming?
Crisscross.
Yes. You get him this data core with information, all kinds of Imperial records, and then you're like, wow, I remember 6 hours ago when Jalen was also talking about his failed car dealership. This guy must be related to Slero. And so there's this twist where it's like, ooh, Jalen is Slero's brother. And it is just so obvious. It's from the second that Jalen says, not even from the beginning when you first meet him, you're like, well, he's obviously got something to do with the Slero guy because he's out of the blue asking to do this. And then he says the car dealership thing, and you're like, oh, they're family, and they hate each other. And it was just telegraphed from a billion parsecs away. It was bad. It was bad.
Yep.
And so Jalen steals this data core, goes back to the Empire, and he says, I'm going to sell this data back to you, and I want to run Zarek Besh in my brother's stead. Darth Vader agrees, and so then Jalen kills Slero. Well, Kay is not that upset that she didn't get any money. She's more upset that ND5, her close personal friend, is being enslaved by Jalen and forced to kill people. And so she breaks onto this Star Destroyer, Akiva bound, to destroy the Rebel base on Akiva, and she has to break ND5 off of his restraining bolt. And so the real treasure at the end of this game is friendship.
Yeah.
Because she gets ND5 back. She learns that she has something to live for, that freedom isn't freedom unless you have people to care about, all the tropes, it's very Star Wars. It's a good message. There's nothing wrong with it.
Also Rose Tico influence.
I don't agree with that. I
no.
So.
Like it was. I did it for love.
I don't agree with that. I don't think that it's very similar to Rose's story.
No, not her story. Just that one line.
Oh, I understand.
You're overthinking it. Oh, I saved him for love.
And so she saves ND5, and now you're just out in the galaxy as a criminal, and about to be the collapsing galaxy.
Quote unquote criminal.
Right, quote unquote criminal. And so ND5 ends up being the final boss of the game. He's chasing you around a Star Destroyer. It's kind of like a horror level because you can't do anything. You're not fighting Indy 5, which is also cool because they make Indy 5 out the whole game to just be this like insurmountable character.
Even then, right before this, there's a quick draw between Jalen and Indy 5. Right? Was it Jalen or
at
Slero?
the end of this? As soon as you disable,
I'm jumping the gun. I'm sorry.
Well, he does first. Indy 5 just roasts Slero mid-conversation, which is super cool. The criminal bad guys, again, they're bad guys. They do bad stuff. It's all of that is really good. It's just K that doesn't do bad stuff.
But my only main point was you're not going to outdraw Indy 5.
No, you're not. Because then there is another shootout.
What's his name? Cad Bane would have a tough time.
Yes, he would. It was super cool. Indy 5 is a really, really cool character. And so you're, at the end of the game, Indy 5 guns Jalen down, and you learn that you're living for family and that caring about somebody is your freedom, and then that's the end of the game. I mean, you're out there. It's an open world game. You didn't complete all the missions, I guarantee it, before you finish the main story, and so you have a lot to do.
That's the point of buying this game is there's going to be more missions.
There's more DLC. We're getting the Lando mission soon and the Hondo one around Christmas time.
Yeah, those will be fun.
Yeah.
My biggest bone to pick, I guess, with the story, not any of what we talked about, but you'd go to interact with somebody and, there's so many movies. Like the most prominent one that comes to my mind is Beverly Hills Cop. And Eddie Murphy, he's not an outlaw. He's a police officer, but he's doing all these outlaw things. And he'll walk up to somebody and tell this bald-faced lie to them, and they'll believe it, and he'll go on to doing his investigation to catch the bad guy. Mm-hmm. And every time you try and do that with this character, she tells the worst lie you've ever heard. And the NPCs call her out right after that. Okay, you're lying. What's really going on here? And then she spills her guts, and you go about your business.
Right.
And that happened multiple times.
Yeah,
start of the game, middle of the game.
She's inept most of the time. Yeah, she's inept in most of the game. Not at like doing things, but in talking.
Yeah, well, she's a hero when it comes to doing things.
Yes.
I mean, she's doing these missions for Tusken Raiders, and I saw a screenshot somewhere with a crate dragon doing some stuff, and I mean, goodness gracious, the intestinal fortitude to go sneak onto an Imperial facility where there's just peril at every turn. I can't even imagine what it would take to do that, But then she can't tell a lie to somebody in a bar.
Right.
It's strange.
Yeah. I mean, look, she can't be great at everything, I guess. But
yes.
It is, the dialogue's not awesome a lot of the time. A lot of the side writing is really good just because it's the world-building writing. But this part of the writing is not great. But again, that's kind of the whole game. Like that's the main story. That's the highlights of it. There's a lot of game left to play. I mean, I'll be playing this for weeks, just slowly grinding out random different quests that I want to do. When the Lando mission and the Hondo mission comes out, we'll be talking about those, reviewing those. But that's really the gist of the game. You got anything else to say about it?
Would you recommend this game? I mean, would you recommend this game to other people? Like somebody says, "Hey, Carter, I'm thinking about picking up Star Wars Outlaws. Are you having fun? What do you think?" How would you respond to that question?
Yeah, I guess just generally a stranger, I would maybe tell him to wait till it's on sale. I don't know. Like it's worth experiencing as a Star Wars fan because there's a lot of just really cool Star Wars stuff. It's slow to get going. It's pretty slow to get going, like really slow to get going. But once you get it going, it's fun. I mean, the open world is awesome. The story itself, the main quest, it makes sense. It's a Star Wars story. It's very personal. It's not some big galaxy-defining story. That's fine. And so everything about the game, it's got good structure, but I mean, full price isn't necessary.
So if somebody were to pose that question to me, I'd retell them with my experience with us doing this podcast and me wanting to see the Star Wars story, and because I do want to finish the game. You talked about the front load of those missions being so hard. I really want to see how they kind of tweak some of that stuff, and I want to learn all this stuff about being an outlaw and all that, whatever. But if I were a little bit more casual and I got to that Gorax hideout mission, I would have requested a refund almost immediately. Sure. Because it was so rage-inducing to have just this nonsense thing reset you back so far. I can $80 is a tank of gas. So, goodness gracious.
Yeah, well, again, there's that big front load is really tough. It's a lot to ask of somebody to get through all of that beginning. It does get a lot better is kind of the issue. And I think it lost a lot of people in the beginning, which is not good. They're not coming back. People who are lost on a game like that, they're not going to come back to come play it.
Yep.
And so it's disappointing that that's the case, but it gets a lot better. And if you just want to experience the Star Wars galaxy, this is probably the best game to do that. Better than Survivor. Much better than Survivor to experience the Star Wars galaxy.
Just from a Jedi perspective and his little crew in Survivor, going to the different planets, and they're so vast. I said it kind of wasn't open world. That's more like an open mission type thing. But it does switch to that, and it's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, the world is very open. And so if you just would love to see the stuff on Tatooine, you want to make your own little career where you're really good with the pikes and you hate the Hutts or whatever, you can do that. And all that stuff is really pretty rewarding. It's a lot of fun. I think it would have just moved it in a more fun direction if you could have done your own character. Like we have talked about, that may have drawn more people in. I think that the story is really it's pretty self-insert that it could have been that way, but they didn't do that.
Yeah. Another thing that kind of draws me to this game, I've seen a screenshot, and I don't really want to spoil it here, but I think there's a lot of Easter eggs that have to do with other characters and this and that, crawling through vents and seeing different things. And this world is so detailed and so vast that it feels to me like there's a lot of secrets out there. And I'm probably overthinking it, but it feels there's a lot of secrets out there that are just waiting to be discovered.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot. There's a ton of Easter eggs from just what I've seen, and I know there's a lot more because all those side quests, pretty much every side quest is going to exist to be some little Easter egg. That's why they make those side quests in these games like that. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to finish the game. As far as recommending it to somebody, I'd say get it on sale.
Yeah.
But definitely, if you're a Star Wars fan, it's worth playing. It's worth getting to kick around Tatooine and Kijimi for a little while. Those two planets, huge highlight for me. Kijimi's super cool.
Yeah.
We haven't talked a whole lot about it. It's worth going and exploring. It is really awesome. And the Ashiga clan, they're a real criminal organization. They are tough. They do terrible things, and they are super interesting.
Yep. Go to Kijimi while you can. It won't be there in another several years.
Exactly.
20 some odd, right?
Not there for long. All right, well, we've got a lot more show to get to, so let's hop on to our next segment. We've got a How the Force Works question to get to.
That's not how the Force works.
All right, Colin, so this Patreon question, this How the Force Works question, submitted by our wonderful Patreon subscriber, Loaf, asks, who is your favorite member of the Rebel Alliance outside of the big three plus Lando and Chewbacca? So basically, outside of the main characters of the original trilogy, who is your favorite member of the Rebel Alliance?
My first thing that comes to my mind is the Spectre team.
Yeah, the Ghost Crew?
The Ghost Crew. I really liked Hera because she was like the mom of that whole squad.
Mm-hmm.
And the values she put, she wasn't a Jedi, she wasn't a Force user. And seeing her develop in that show was really fun. Let me see past that. Because that's kind of like a low-hanging fruit, right?
Sure. Hera's abstractly my answer too. I felt like that one was a little easy, but I agreed. That was almost verbatim what I was going to say.
Well, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to think of somebody else. You could say Mon Mothma. Luthen Rail, I guess, would be another.
Yeah,
really
Luthen's a good one. Luthen's a very good one.
And Andor's in the Cassian Andor's in the same thing. And we can't, those are all our meaty friends. We can say all the droid ones, outside the main four, C-3PO and R2-D2.
Sure.
They could be included. The main five is what it should be.
Yeah.
But K2SO was really awesome, I thought, in that. Who was the pilot who stole the plans and brought them to...
Oh, Bodhi Rook?
Bodhi Rook. He was a real linchpin character.
A very important,
He got
well,
that poor guy.
He's this weenie the whole time. He's attacked by Bor Gullet and is
Bor Gullet. That's what I was going to say. It seems like a simple thing, but in that Rogue One movie, so much revolves around all the individual characters. You know, who is the blind guy? I'm sorry, I don't know these names. Chirrut Imwe, yep. He goes and flips that switch, you know, and his little friend,
Baze Malbus,
protected him the whole time, right? Everything revolved around all the individuals in that movie. And it was so fun. And
well, each one played a pivotal role. That was one of the really cool parts. I before you list every member of the Rebel Alliance.
Sorry. hold it down in my head and let me pick one. I'll say Luthen Rail, because his ship was awesome.
Oh, yeah. And we're going to get a lot more out of him in this next season, too.
Can't wait.
I'm sure that's going to increase.
I'm sorry for doing that, but it's too hard to pick. That's not a fair question. I mean, because okay, I'll shut up.
I'll say, so you talked about a lot of really good ones. But I think that my number one answer has got to be Wedge Antilles. Because
that's a good answer.
As far as the OT goes, he's there from the very beginning. He's like the only guy
Shows up
from
at
the
the
very
very
beginning. He is there in A New Hope, he is there in Empire, and he is there in Return of the Jedi. He helps destroy the Death Star, he helps blow it up with Lando, and we've seen him in the expanded universe, we've seen him in Rebels, we've seen him in New Canon, we've seen him all over the place because he's a really good character, really easy one to write. He was well written in Heir to the Empire, he was well written in all the X-Wing books, he was well written in all the new stuff. He has been all over the place, and he's always been really, really good.
Well, he's just as pivotal character as any of the ones I mentioned, because he had to have trained Luke on how to operate that X-Wing. And Luke couldn't have operated as efficiently as he did without Wedge's help.
Right. And there's just so many moments where Rogue Squadron is pivotal to the Alliance's survival in all kinds of media. And so I really think Wedge Antilles is up there for me.
Great pick.
So we appreciate that question, Loaf. We appreciate you asking it. And if you want to ask us a question, dear listener, all you have to do is head on over to patreon.com/Star Wars Station and then find any of our tiers. And we start at $1, and you can start asking us questions over there at patreon.com/Star Wars Station. And now we need to get to the HoloNet news segment because there's a lot of news going on, but I mentioned at the top of the show, we need to talk about the passing of James Earl Jones, and so we are going to go to the HoloNet news.
You made the HoloNet.
All right, Colin, so we have a few news stories to talk about today, but the first one that we need to talk about is the biggest one of the week, and it's one that's really disappointing. I texted you immediately when I learned that this happened, and that is that James Earl Jones, the voice of Darth Vader, passed away at the age of 93 on Monday, which would have been the 9th, September the 9th.
Yeah. Man, what an impactful actor out there. I watched so many of his movies that he was in. He's always a supporting actor in almost every case. And but like if you were to swap out the actors or do change his role somewhat, the movies would just not be the same. They'd be B movies you never heard of, And what I'm thinking of most prominently is like Conan the Barbarian, and he's the warlord who set Conan on his path. And then in Field of Dreams, he was the linchpin that got Kevin Costner's character to spur him to doing what the plot of the movie was. And like The Sandlot, he's the hero of the movie at the end. Have you seen any of those?
Yeah, I've seen The Sandlot.
Okay. And so it's not just Star Wars. And then the big one that a lot of people, it's a generational thing almost, or if you don't like Star Wars, everybody else knows him from The Lion King.
Yeah. Mufasa,
Simba's dad. And, that the reason we're all talking about him is that commanding voice. And there's all these different roles in these movies, and you can find clips on YouTube of him being an actor in a play and stuff. And it's crazy how it's not just his voice, but his mannerisms and intonation and all this other stuff. I even saw a Letterman top 10 list of catchphrases that would be funny if James Earl Jones said them. It was hilarious. One of them was that stupid cat food, meow, 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 meow. It was him saying that. It was totally impactful. It penetrated your soul when he talked.
Yeah, no,
Very
absolutely.
Cool.
And you say that there's a lot of those B-list movies that were made because of him, and I think Star Wars may be one of those, because we talked about on our 100th episode just the miracle that was Star Wars, that it was so successful after sci-fi movies had been super unsuccessful in Hollywood for more than a decade, and that a lot of magic had to come together to make Star Wars happen. Well, one of those big pieces of magic is James Earl Jones as Darth Vader. Darth Vader is just not as imposing of a character without that voice. No disrespect to David Prowse whatsoever, but you see the behind-the-scenes clips of David Prowse reading the lines for Vader, and it has none of the same impact, none of the same weight whatsoever. And so you have James Earl Jones's performance as Darth Vader, I think, being one of the keys to the fact that Star Wars has lasted for 47 years.
Yeah, and I just checked it because I didn't want to be wrong. That first movie, James Earl Jones was paid $7,000. The ROI on that $7,000 is insane.
Yep.
Crazy.
It's absolutely
small
insane.
Little fact, but yeah, and it's just to echo your point, it was David Prowse who voiced Darth Vader during the whole time, and I think they're in that editing room. It's a famous story, so if I get any details wrong, please correct me. But the guy in the editing room were like, "This isn't going to work," and they hired James Earl Jones to do this for $7,000, and the rest is history. It's crazy.
Yep, it is. It's pretty astounding, actually, and to have that big of a cultural impact. Darth Vader's the biggest villain in the world ever to ever exist. There has never been a villain that is more well known than Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And so James Earl Jones is the big key behind that. It's the look, but it's also the voice behind it. And it's going to be in a really interesting territory now. We just talked about on this podcast how they didn't use James Earl Jones's voice for Outlaws. I don't know what that means. I don't know why, like, if it costs so much to use it, because we do know that his voice has already been used through AI. They did Obi-Wan Kenobi, the 2022 series. His voice was used and generated with AI for that series, and his estate and he himself approved that, and so that's fine. And they have future use for James Earl Jones's voice as Darth Vader, so we're not going to be losing that per se, but we're going to be losing it. There's a difference between having an actor physically there and having a computer generated. There's some soul that just will not be behind those lines.
You're exactly right. If I had to guess, the reason it's just budget.
Yeah, it is expense in the game for sure. I know that is the reason in the game, but I'm saying that we have now the next appearance of Darth Vader, voiced by James Earl Jones, will be solely the AI.
Yeah, and that's a shame.
It is a shame.
Well, shame constrained by human limitations.
Exactly. So, I'm happy and grateful we're going to get to keep having that iconic Darth Vader voice, and that James Earl Jones is going to be able to live on that way. But it's sad that he's no longer with us. And so we, our prayers go out to his family. Our prayers go out to, all the Star Wars fans who are upset with this loss, because we're there with you. It's really, really sad that this loss has happened.
Yep, very sad.
So among all the discussion of using people's likeness and AI and a voice, there is a pretty interesting news story that came out today. Tyburn Film Productions is a company in London, and they are suing Disney because they used Peter Cushing's likeness in Rogue One, which is super interesting that the lawsuit's coming now, about nearly a decade after Rogue One. But this has been working through the courts, and it says that Disney was not using Peter Cushing's likeness with full authority from this Tyburn Film from this Tyburn Film Company.
Man, this is where you get into this high-minded lawyer territory that is just beyond a reasonable person's knowledge limitations. I mean, because so much of this stuff is, when somebody's not alive anymore, does the estate have those rights?
Well, they had an agreement with the estate. They did not have agreement with the film company where they lifted the pictures, from what I understand.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But see but my point more is like, when you start doing these things, you walk into a minefield. Like James Earl Jones. What if he says something in this old movie? I don't know. I guess Disney owns all that now, but there's so much peril in this thing that there's going to have to be new laws passed that govern this digital recreation stuff. And it's going to be a hard slog. That's going to be a disaster at first.
Yeah, it is. It is going to be like that. I don't know, because there's a lot. This technology is going to keep coming. James Earl Jones is not the last exceptionally famous actor that's going to pass away in the next 20 years that we're going to have to figure this out for. And so it's going to be interesting to see the legal battles that take place surrounding this.
I mean, there's philosophical discussions to be had as well. We're talking about this, so I'm sitting there thinking, as long as the budget exists, if you're an aspiring Darth Vader voice actor, you just lost your job.
Yeah.
And not just, for all eternity. Maybe Mark Thompson can voice him in a book here or there, but if he's not going to do it for a movie.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, he's not. And so it's going to be interesting for sure to see how this spins out and to how acceptable it's going to be, because eventually, I mean, will anyone ever have a new acting job, or will we just keep casting dead folks to play
And that was
roles?
kind of my point. Several years ago, there was a hologram of Tupac Shakur, the rapper who was shot, and people flipped out over that because he was dancing on stage or something. I don't remember the exact details. But, if today's AI recreations are just voice, what if the next AI recreations are holograms or digital insertions of mocap stuff that's so real you can't even tell the difference?
Right.
And so when we say Mission Impossible 237 in the year 2475 starring Tom Cruise's digital recreation, that's probably going to suck.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's kind of, acting no longer is a career because a group of people in the 20th century were so good at it that we never let go.
No, that's one, but they never stopped making money.
Yeah.
We're sitting here having noticed that, hey, Darth Vader didn't sound right in this. Well, if you spend $100,000, you can make him sound exactly like to the casual, except for the most discerning fans, are not going to tell the difference between Darth Vader and somebody else.
Right.
Translate that to some silly hologram. If stupid Mission Impossible movies are still making money 100 years from now from mocap nonsense, why would they stop making them?
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. And so, nothing new under the sun is going to become more and more of a reality.
Well, I mean, existence will be pain, I guess, at that point.
So something that'll make existence a little bit better, hopefully, is this last bit of news, is that Ahsoka, the television show, I don't know if you've heard of it or not, but the second season for that will be filming this time next year, according to Natasha Liu Bordizzo, who played Sabine Wren.
Very nice. That's very heartening to hear.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what they do about Ray Stevenson and his passing away, how they handle that. I know we're all most interested in how that's going to be handled, but I'm very excited to see that story continued. It's going to be really good.
And the same lament I had with Acolyte is about, the first seasons sometimes get started off rough. I personally don't think Ahsoka was that way. There are some people who disagree, but this show's really going to come to its own in this one. I mean, we get to see more of Huyang. Who doesn't want that?
Yeah, for real. Absolutely. Absolutely true. So that wraps up our HoloNet news, and now we're going to head on over to our Star Wars Moment of the Week for our last segment. So let's go over there right now.
We would be honored if you would join us.
So, Colin, my Star Wars Moment of the Week is related to that little soundbite right there, because that soundbite is obviously also James Earl Jones voicing Darth Vader. And so my Star Wars Moment of the Week has a little something to do with that. So in New York, we were in New York for the weekend, and we missed by just a few hours the Empire State Building being lit up with an image of Darth Vader.
I saw a picture of that online.
Yeah, it was really impressive. That's where I saw it too, was online, because we had just left the city, the day that the news of his passing happened. And so we didn't get to see that in person, but I did get to see something that I thought was really, really neat, and that Brian, our friend, a huge Star Wars fan, he was on our 100th episode, he's on the RPG podcast, been a Star Wars fan since the beginning, honored James Earl Jones in his own way. Brian's a high school math teacher, and he put up on his projector on the wall of his classroom, 8-hour loop all day uninterrupted, Vader's funeral pyre going.
Oh, that's crazy
in
cool.
remembrance of James Earl Jones in his classroom. And so I thought that was a really unique way to pay homage.
That is
to pay homage to James Earl Jones. And so that was my Star Wars moment of the week, was Brian sharing that with me.
Yeah, that's a good moment of the week. Mine pales in comparison. You've heard me talk on here several times about having a little baby. Well, babies grow. And guess what that means? They need bigger clothes. So guess what I get to buy? More Star Wars baby clothes.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun. Most of them have Grogu or...
Yeah, I'm sure all of them are Grogu themed, right?
They're Grogu adjacent or very, very few that aren't. Some have TIE fighters or X-Wings on them or something like that. They're fun.
Yeah, that's cool.
But it's just a small commentary on the amount of Star Wars merch that's out there. It's an insurmountable mountain.
Oh, it is. It's a total
crazy.
mountain. Are you familiar with Rancho Obi-Wan?
No.
So Rancho Obi-Wan is in California. It's in Northern California somewhere. I don't know exactly where it is. I've never been. I'd like to go. It is the largest private collection of Star Wars memorabilia anybody ever has.
Wow.
And at this point, I think Lucasfilm just has to send them products because they get stuff like that. I mean, they have, like, this random baby clothes onesie that's on some shelf somewhere.
Right.
They're going to have the Pez dispenser manufactured in 1986 with, a missing tooth on the character. Like, it is down to every product that has been released. And since Star Wars, exploded around Star Wars has always been massive, but since Star Wars merchandising just super exploded in 2005, I think they've gotten every piece of Star Wars ever made of any product.
Yeah, that'd be so interesting to see.
Yeah, it would. It's
you start thinking about that between action figures and limited edition statues and lunch boxes and giveaways and Happy Meals or something like that.
I've got a Star Wars air freshener sitting on my Star Wars shelf. And it's like, it was in 2005, Revenge of the Sith. It is the A New Hope logo, just on a regular, hang it in your car, stop smelling in a week air freshener.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so that thing being on my shelf means that those guys who run Rancho Obi-Wan have the most obscure, you've never heard of, Italian only C-3PO cereal bowl was made 500 of them. Yep. I mean, it's pretty impressive stuff.
There's so many of those things that pop up, these really niche things. One of them I'd like to see is there was a promotion at Walmart back in the late 90s or for maybe the early 2000s for the Clone Wars. It was 100 Stormtrooper set. And it was supposed to be for people to come in and get a Star Wars minifig. Well, some of them got squirreled away, and people own that, like new in the box. And the other thing is I think Taco Bell had like a Pepsi drink dispenser from, it would look like the droid ships that would dispense the droids, but it was dispensing the drinks.
Yeah, that's cool.
I've seen some influencers post stuff like that.
Yeah, that MTT, I do want one of those.
It's very cool.
Yeah, super cool. So anyway, the Star Wars merch discussion, that's a big discussion. But everyone, we appreciate you listening to this podcast. This is the end of this week's episode. Star Wars Outlaws was a lot of fun. Like I said, as those DLCs come out, we'll be reviewing those too, and we're going to get to talk about them, so we're excited about that. We got a lot more Star Wars for the rest of the year and on into 2025 for you guys. We got a lot to talk about. Skeleton Crew, now on the horizon. That's kind of the next thing in the crosshair, just a couple months down the road, and we're going to be getting Skeleton Crew.
Yeah, it'll be here before you know it. I can't wait to watch that.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm super pumped about it. It's going to be a lot of fun. We appreciate you guys still hanging on with us. And if you've listened to it this far, you're probably a fan, so please leave a 5-star review over on Spotify, Apple. You can review us on YouTube. You can leave us a comment. You can give us a like, a subscription, all those YouTube pleasantries. We really appreciate it. We would love if you guys would engage with us on social media. We are at SW_station on Twitter, StarWars.station on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook at Star Wars Station. Star Wars Station Cantina is our Facebook group. We've got the website, StarWarsStationPodcast.com, and we got the Patreon, Patreon.com/Star Wars Station. So be sure to check us out there. Follow us on all of those platforms.
Yeah, lots of stuff out there. Everything's popping. Star Wars streaming. Star Wars Station, or what? Twitch.tv/Station Media. There we go.
Yep, exactly. Streamed
Space
Outlaws.
Marine.
Yeah.
Coming up on that next.
Space Marine 2, going to be streaming more of that.
I've had employees of mine to stop. Are you playing that game? I'm like, I've already beat it, man.
Yeah, definitely. So, everyone continue to check us out over on Twitch, all of our other channels, and everyone continue to stay wizard.